We live in a dangerous world. The gods who built it vanished, leaving behind their instruments that aimlessly reshaped the land.
What's up, it's your returning champion, Gggmanlives, and if you're feeling a bit of deja vu right now, well, that's perfectly normal. Because what I've had to do is re-edit my original review for Anthem because it was deemed too negative. And I guess on top of that, I've now been added to the long list of blacklisted YouTubers. Re-editing this video, though, has allowed me to go over what a lot of people have been saying about the game and given me the comfort in knowing that I don't think I was really alone in my sentiments about how I felt about the game. Because after having played the full version of the game, I can still say confidently that this might be the most disappointing game I've played in 2019. And at times it feels either rushed, poorly thought out, or just in some cases unfinished. Anthem, I think, is just a bad game, plain and simple. And it's a shame too, because never has there been so much talent gone into creating such a vibrant, exotic looking game world with a fantastic soundtrack and superb presentation. Someone spent all this time coming up with all these interesting creatures, characters and factions in a game that, because of its underdeveloped gameplay, is going to be largely overshadowed.
Really?
And ignored by the myriad of fundamental issues the game has. Issues that a day one patch has barely managed to address. The worst part is that you see how fun this game could have been, like you see the elements in place, but they're just not being brought to life. Anthem is at least a cool premise on the surface, so you're playing as someone called a Freelancer who rides around in these armoured suits called Javelins, and you can choose from one of 4 different classes essentially, which have different abilities and loadouts. Then you fly around these large, detailed, though still somehow empty maps, killing the same variety of enemies over and over. As you level up, you can unlock the suits in the order of your choosing, with there being 4 in total if you end up sticking around that long. This component of the game isn't outright bad, but it is just a little bit generic. Anthem's stability is its most obvious affliction, and it doesn't take too long to see the game is about as stable as a 3-legged chair. For starters, the game just doesn't seem to be that well optimized. I've tried fiddling around with a bunch of different settings, I've turned things down or off, and I still get a really choppy frame rate a lot of the time. It's worst in Fort Tarsus, which is like the game's central hub, because this area has a lot of NPCs in one place. But also during random missions, the performance is just going to tank for no apparent reason. It's pretty rare to see a Frostbite engine title running so poorly. I mean, I think every game I've ever played on this engine has always been really well optimized. So you kind of got to hand it to these guys for ruining that aspect. Anyone who plays shooting games knows how much a bad frame rate can really affect how well you play, and it's not all that different in Anthem. But if only you knew how bad things really were. So every single action in this game seems to require some kind of loading screen, and some of these load times are just fucking horrendous. Like at one point, simply loading into a mission took me upwards of 5 minutes. And then you gotta hope you can even get past that loading screen itself. The first main mission in the game I attempted to load in, but it crashed 3 times. And then when I finally got in, I got kicked from the server a few minutes afterwards anyway. Then on top of that, if you load in and the team is too far away, it's going to teleport you to them if you don't reach them in time, forcing upon you yet another loading screen. I've even had it do this to me when I'm standing next to my team because it's one of the game's many bugs. Oh, and the best bit, the warning message for the countdown covers the meter that shows if your flight suit is overheating. So if you're desperately flying there to catch up, you don't even know if your jets need to be cooled. I think I literally spent more time in loading screens than actually playing the game for the first session I had with Anthem, and that's not a good start. Now the day one patch did address these loading screen issues somewhat, but all it really means now that instead of me waiting 2 minutes, I have to wait 90 seconds. And the loading screens are still there all the time. I mean, they can't be patched out. And why is something so simple as connecting to a match so difficult? Why is the basic notion of playing the game in its intended state something that's so hard to deliver? Then even once you start to get into the game and you can finally play through the missions, you'll notice the gameplay isn't really even all that amazing or engaging. And it seems that every single mission just pretty much follows a similar path. Being fly here, fetch something, kill a bunch of enemies, then fly somewhere else. All the while listening to some NPC talk constantly about what's happening, but their dialogue is often muffled by the constant sound of explosions and gunfire. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that every mission pretty much follows this structure of just killing stuff, then flying to another area, and then killing more stuff. The mission often ends with a boss fight, then a notification that the mission has ended, and then you're thrown back to the menu. The point where the game really started to break me, and when I officially gave up, was when I got to what might be one of the most blatant and lame attempts at panning out a game's campaign that I've ever seen. And this is the horrible Trial of the Legionnaires mission. At this point to progress the campaign, the only way ahead is to literally complete side challenges. You have to complete 4 of these trials to enter 4 different tombs. You literally have to grind achievements to continue the main story. Get a certain amount of kills, open 15 treasure chests, that sort of shit. Now there's 4 tombs in total and like 16 challenges all up, but some of these aren't really that straightforward. Like good luck finding those treasure chests without a guide, for instance. I mean, sometimes they don't even spawn into the map at all. And if you're playing with friends, you all have to find 15 of these. So have fun searching for 45 of these things without a walkthrough. You can alternatively complete world events for chests too, so that's only 15 you'd need to complete, but world events requires flying around the map randomly until one of these activates. So again, have fun flying around aimlessly until you complete 15 of these. And you want to know the worst part? You can't even track each of these individually. You have to keep going back into the menu to check on them. Like I said, this was the point when I'd officially given up on Anthem, and I've spoken to several other people who also dropped the game entirely at this point because of this mission, and I don't blame them. How's the combat side of things though? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Looking at Anthem from a distance, you might think the combat looks pretty good on the surface, and it does feel good initially just going in and blowing things up. But the amount of explosions and other visual effects clogging up the screen just starts to get really overwhelming. Not to mention, it starts to inhibit your ability to be aware of your surroundings and what's actually going on. I lost count the amount of times I suddenly got all my health knocked off and didn't even realise because it was just impossible to notice the damage indicators. You know what I mean, with people using their abilities every 3 seconds. A friend of mine even joked that he needed to wear sunglasses when playing the game, and that's actually not too far off how bad it can be at times. It's like having your eyes raped by a solar flare. There's some really weird things too with the way that enemies kind of spawn in during combat, coming out of seemingly nowhere. Like look at this clip for instance, I only engaged like 3 or 4 guys in combat, but now it's a goddamn orgy. And then of course there's all the various bugs in there too, like my favourite being these big Rancor looking guys that can throw invisible rocks. It's just this constant sensory and information overload that just becomes incredibly grating. And all it's really doing is dangling a shiny object in front of the player's face to mask how repetitive and tedious the combat really is. Even as a looter shooter, Anthem isn't all that good. When loot drops, you're not even told what it is at the time. You just get either an uncommon, common, rare item or whatever. Then you have to wait until the entire mission ends to see what it is. And only then when you return to the Forge, which is like the loadout screen, can you even equip it. And of course, that's after you've sat through like 3 or 4 loading screens. Remember how much fun it was in games like Diablo when you came across a new weapon or piece of armor for the first time? Or in Borderlands when you found a new gun and you couldn't equip it fast enough? Yeah, remember that? Well, there's none of that here. Weapon variety is also just completely lacking. Like there's shotguns, pistols, assault rifles and all that kind of stuff, but they're all the same. A shotgun you get at the start of the game is going to look exactly the same as one you get later on. It's just the damage number is going to be higher and it might be a different color. The gun itself just looks identical. And again, compare this to something like Borderlands, where guns are dropping every 2 seconds and every one of them is different. I mean, half of them might have been better used as doorstops, but they were still unique visually. The goal of Anthem is to get better gear so you can play on the harder difficulties and get even better gear. But the only thing that increasing the difficulty does is increase the health enemies have and the damage they do, which is the definition of artificial difficulty. Like it doesn't make them any smarter or more intelligent or add in any new tricks for them. They just turn into sponges and you turn into a porcelain teapot. Combat works around the concept of combos and your abilities have different attributes to facilitate this. So a combo might be freezing an enemy with a frost grenade, then zapping them with lightning. This is a system in game that's referred to as primers and detonators, and when used properly, it's pretty effective. Now, an ability that doesn't function as a primer or a detonator doesn't allow for combos as far as I can tell, though on the flip side, these abilities will do more base damage. So it's like a trade-off between outright damage for a single player, or potentially increasing the effectiveness of your squad by helping them set up combos. But this system is just woefully miscommunicated, like it's never once explained in game, unless I like fell asleep or something. And the only explanation you get is a paragraph of text in your journal. Outside all of this though, there's just all these little issues that just show a complete lack of understanding into what goes into making a game seamless and enjoyable. Basic things, yeah, that every game I think should adhere to are just completely overlooked. Like if a mission crashes or stops before you've properly finished it, all of the experience you gained gets lost. Anthem also has just an incredibly unintuitive user interface, which might be one of the most confusing I've seen in a game in recent years. Now, I don't know if it's been designed around controllers or something, like I was playing on the PC, but I found it really hard to digest and figure out what information the game is trying to tell me. There's just so much shit to filter through, and it's presented in a way that just feels like someone flinging their crap at a wall and hoping it sticks. I think the map screen is the worst. Like, I can't even put down a custom marker or anything. I mean, it's not like I would want to put down custom markers in free play, is it? Yeah, I'm happy going back to the map screen every 5 seconds to make sure I'm still heading in the right direction. For a combat system that relies so heavily on this whole priming and detonating thing with its abilities, it is astounding that there's no way to even ping enemies. Like, this would have been really handy during combat, wouldn't it? So everyone would know to focus their attacks on a single enemy. Would have been useful. How can there be a team-based shooter released in 2019 without the option to ping enemies? This is coming off the heels of Apex Legends 2, which had such an intuitive pinging system to the point that you could communicate crucial information to other players in seconds without ever having to speak a single word. Whereas Anthem offers up nothing in comparison. You can't even text chat. Like I said, it is fucking astounding. Other bugs included my mouse that just stopped responding. All of the sound simply cutting out, forcing an entire restart.
Yeah, that's what I can see as well.
And various issues of pop-in for textures, enemies, and entire pieces of geometry that would literally appear right in front of me. I couldn't even suffer through this with my mate because his game kept crashing every 5 minutes. As soon as he'd get into the game, he'd just get disconnected and crash. And that was after we actually got the player invites to work in the first place. The final breaking point for me was when I couldn't even interact with items in the game world. The option to harvest something or interact by pressing the F button just simply stopped working. At this point, I'd already restarted my game a couple of dozen times, and by now, I'm just not willing to keep doing it. This whole thing just ain't acceptable.
Nothing you can't fix.
At a time when AAA developers are constantly in the firing line for various reasons, a game like Anthem just sure isn't helping. And for Electronic Arts, this is like ripping a band-aid off a fresh wound. After Apex Legends came along and showed that good things were possible, this thing just drops like a goddamn fart bomb and rips it all apart. Could this game be saved through patches and future content? I mean, maybe? Gotta say that I hated Rainbow Six Siege the first time I played it, but Ubisoft stuck with it over the years. They listened to player feedback and they vastly improved the game. And now it's my most played online game, shortly after Club Penguin. So maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel if they listen to player feedback and try to fix the problems this game has. But some of these problems are so deeply woven into the core mechanics of the game that I just don't know if it's possible.
Problems. We help people.
So it pains me to say this, but I simply can't recommend Anthem, not in this state. If the loading screens don't turn you off, well, the repetitive and drab gameplay certainly will.
I'd say that fulfills the contract. Time to get back to full Colossus. 2 job well done.